Welcome to Vocab Unit 11. Your first root is asper, which means rough or harsh, and your first word is aspersion. It is a noun, and it is a damaging remark or a criticism. So I would remember this word criticism in thinking about aspersions. Your helpful hint is that you often hear this word in the phrase cast aspersions, meaning say nasty things about someone. So that's why there's a witch over here. A witch casts spells. People who have criticisms of others cast aspersions. Your sample sentence is Daryl's parents taught him well to never cast aspersions against his classmates as he never knew what difficulties they had gone through in their lives. So I just gave you that little reminder. Witches cast spells, mean people cast aspersions. Your next word is exasperation. It is also a noun, and it is extreme annoyance or frustration. So this person over here looks like she is experiencing exasperation. You can also say that someone is exasperated. And that would be an adjective. And your sample sentence is Donald's exasperation hit its peak when both his plumbing and electricity failed during the mild storm. So he was very frustrated or very exasperated because he had no plumbing and no electricity. Your next root is cogn or gnos, which means know or understand. And your first word is cognition. It is a noun, and it is the act of knowing or perception. I think it's sometimes a little bit easier to use in the adjective form, so I gave you a couple ways to use the word cognitive. So your cognitive abilities are the abilities of your cognition, right? So your knowing, your perception. Cognitive delays would be for children, like delays in developing knowledge or delays in developing perception. Your sample sentence is the couple bought interactive DVDs and trendy books in an attempt to assist their newborn child's cognition. So parents tend to want their children to have advanced cognitive abilities and to do things to enhance their child's cognition, their child's kind of ability to learn. Your next word is prognosis. It's a noun, and it means a forecast or educated guess, especially of the outcome of a disease or affliction. So this word I think is easiest to understand in how it is different from diagnosis. So a diagnosis is when the doctor says you have a cold. The prognosis is this forecast about what's going to happen next. So, all right, I've diagnosed you with a cold, therefore you will snuffle for 4 days and then you will feel better. So the prognosis is what's going to happen next in your illness. I circled over here this pro. We've had that root before. It means forward. So it's knowledge about what is going to happen next, looking forward. Here's what's going to change in your health usually. Your sample sentence, Maria was thrilled by her doctor's thoroughly positive prognosis of her ailments, while her sister was more pessimistic and believed there might still be a problem. So the doctor's prognosis was that you are going to get better. Your next root is here, which means to cling. And your first word is cohesive. It's an adjective, and it means tending to stick together or unified. There are a couple different ways that this word tends to be used. So the first one, and that goes along with the drawing over here, is a cohesive group. So if you have a cohesive group of friends, everyone gets along really well and sticks together. If you have a cohesive argument, all of your different premises kind of build on each other and stick together and get you to what you're trying to prove. So it all makes sense together. Similarly, a cohesive paragraph is one where all of your ideas work together to prove the same topic sentence. You guys are learning how to write very cohesive paragraphs where everything fits together really well. You're not like rambling all over the place. Your sample sentence is about cohesive writing. Midori's essay was given an A, mostly because of her cohesive analysis of the recurring symbolism in the novel. So her analysis is cohesive because it is all about symbolism. Incoherent is the opposite, actually, of cohesive. It is also an adjective, and it means without logical connection, rambling, disconnected. So you can have an incoherent paragraph if none of it makes sense together, or an incoherent argument if it's not clear what you're trying to prove or why you believe that. Your sample sentence is, when people talk in their sleep, what they say is usually incoherent and doesn't make sense to an outside listener. Similarly, we have this baby over here on the telephone. it is likely that whatever that baby is saying is pretty incoherent to whoever's on the other side. Little kids talk pretty incoherently before they actually learn words and how to put together cohesive sentences. Your next root is you, which means well or good. And your first word is eulogy. It's a noun. It's a speech of praise, usually to honor a deceased person. So you will almost always hear eulogies at funerals. So that's when someone who knows the person who has died stands up and makes a speech and talks about why they will miss them and what a wonderful person they were. Your sample sentence is, the wife's eulogy was powerful and nearly everyone at the funeral service was in tears. Your next word is euphemism. It's a noun, and it is the use of a mild or gentle expression in place of one that is offensive or blunt. So I covered this man over here with euphemisms. So the euphemism would be to say he has a well-defined nose, when actually what I mean is he has a big nose. If I want to say he is old, but I want to use a euphemism, I might say he is of a certain age. If I want to say he's bald, but use a euphemism, I would say he is a little thin on top, right? That's clearly a understatement, a much gentler way of referring to what's actually happening. And I could also use the euphemism and say he has laugh lines when I really mean he has wrinkles, right? So well-defined nose, of a certain age, a little thin on top, laugh lines are all the nicer ways to describe him, so those are all euphemisms. Your sample sentence is, the judge used pleasant euphemisms like spirited and interesting when critiquing the young dancer's frantic and awkward performance. Your next root is per, which means through, and your first word is impervious. It is an adjective. If you see that im there, that root is not, so impervious means that things cannot go through it. Your definition is impenetrable, which means cannot be penetrated, or incapable of being injured. So if you look at this turtle over here, he has a shell that is almost impervious because it's very hard to drive something through it. So you could say that turtle has an impervious shell. You could also say he is impervious to injury. He's not actually, but you could say he is impervious to pain or almost impervious to pain because he cannot be injured. This impervious to is a good usage to remember. You are impervious to whatever cannot harm you. Your sample sentence is, being the youngest of 8 children, she was virtually impervious to insults from her classmates, as she had heard far worse from her own brothers and sisters. I think one good thing to note in the sample sentence is it says virtually impervious, right, which means, yes, there are insults that could still hurt her. Similarly, there are things that could still cause that turtle pain. So I might say, like, almost impervious or nearly impervious, right, because there are very few beings who are actually impervious, right, who actually can't be injured. Your next word is peruse, which is a verb, and it means to read with incredible detail. So this person over here is perusing his newspaper. Your sample sentence says, the boss was successful in finding such talented workers because of the amount of time she dedicated to perusing the applications of her potential employees. So she spends a lot of time reading those applications with incredible detail. Your next root is seku or sekwa, which means follow. Your first word is inconsequential. Again, we have that in, so it's something that is not consequential, or you could think of it as not having large consequences, right? Is that consequence, not having large consequences. It's an adjective. It means of little or no importance. So I have erasers over here because an inconsequential mistake is one that can easily be fixed or easily be erased. An inconsequential detail is one that doesn't particularly matter. Your sample sentence says, the Yankees catcher hit an inconsequential home run in the 9th inning. The Royals were still winning by 9 afterward. So it was inconsequential because it didn't matter. It did not have consequences. Your next word is obsequious. It is also an adjective. It means servile, fawning, ingratiatingly obedient, or being a kiss-up. If you think of this word, servile comes from servant, so it's kind of behaving like you are someone's servant, usually because you want something. Sometimes maybe you just want their respect, maybe you want them to like you, maybe you want your boss to give you a raise or your teacher to give you good grades, and you are being a kiss up, overly obedient, overly like a servant, bringing them flowers when there's no reason to. This word has a pretty negative connotation. You don't really want to be known as obsequious. Usually, if there's an obsequious worker in an office, the other coworkers will resent them and call them a kiss up. So you don't really want to be known as that. Your sample sentence says, the celebrity soon grew tired of his obsequious neighbors who brought over gift baskets solely in an attempt to get him to invite them into his home. Your next root is clued or clus, which means shut. Your first word is secluded, which means sheltered or removed from general activity or view. So this cabin over here is secluded because it's far away from everything else. Your sample sentence says, in order to finish his novel, Clarence had to rent a cabin in a secluded corner of the Canadian wilderness. Your next root is reclusive. This is also an adjective, and it means shut off from the world, shut off from the world, living in solitude. Your sample sentence says, his family's obsession with social media was disappointing and made him become even more reclusive, closing his email accounts and losing contact with several friends and relatives in the process. So he's being reclusive in that he's trying to shut himself off from the world. So this hermit crab over here is being reclusive in that he is shutting himself into his shell. So, important distinction between secluded and reclusive. Secluded refers to a place, right? So a secluded cabin, a secluded neighborhood, a secluded forest. Reclusive refers to a person. So there's a relationship between these two, right? So a reclusive person might live in a secluded cabin, but reclusive is still referring to the person, right? Whereas secluded is referring to the place. Your next root is ify, meaning to become. Your first word is petrify. It's a verb. It has two definitions. It's important that you know both. The first is to turn into stone. So the helpful hint goes along with this one. A petrified forest is one in which the wood has turned to stone. So you'll hear about petrified wood, right, has been turned into stone due to geological processes. Your second definition is to horrify or terrify. The reason that both of these definitions go along with that same word is because petrify, to scare someone, has the sense of like making them so terrified that they become frozen. So in the second half of the helpful hint, it tells you if a movie makes you petrified, it is as if you have been frozen to your seat like a stone statue. So if you look at this girl over here who's scared, right, she can't move, she's terrified, right, so she is petrified. Your sample sentence, the mouse was petrified by the shriek of the attacking owl, and so it froze in its tracks. Your final word for this unit is ratify. It's a verb. It means to confirm by formal sanction. So a law could be ratified, or a contract could be ratified when everyone votes on something and then enough people vote yes to make it pass, it has been ratified. So this picture over here is all of these pro votes, thumbs up, right? Whatever they were voting on has been ratified. Your sample sentence, the ban on poker games during lunchtime was ratified by the school committee by a vote of 8 against 1. One important note about ratify is this is a formal official process, right? So it usually involves votes, whether written votes or oral votes, right? So it's not just like your group of friends agreeing to do something. It's this like formal sanction and formal acceptance. That's all for Unit 11.